In the last few hours, Vice President Kamala Harris had a rare chance to campaign with someone she calls a dear friend and someone who could make history in the U.S. Senate. Angela Alsobrooks is running for Senate in Maryland against the state's popular former Republican governor, Larry Hogan. If she wins and Lisa Blunt, Rochester, wins in Delaware, a race the Cook Political Report rates as solid Democrat, the U.S. Senate would make history, doubling the number of black women ever elected to the upper chamber. I want to bring in Symone Sanders Townsend, the former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris and co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend, and NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist. They let him off of the property of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and he's here with us. So officially today, this was an event about marking Gun Violence Awareness Day. But tell us about Vice President Harris and her message in support of her friend.
So there really were two pieces here. There was this event about gun violence. It was a campaign event, but they were talking about the work that the Biden-Harris administration has done around this issue of gun violence, standing up this Office of Gun Violence Prevention at the end of last year, also talking about some of the rules that have been put in place by the Biden administration, and also urging Congress to do something about assault weapons, to ban assault weapons. That's something we've heard from the administration before. The other part of this, though, was Vice President Harris's endorsement of Angela Alsobrooks for Senate. She's currently the county executive in Prince George's County, Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C. She's the former state's attorney in that county, which we know Vice President Harris was also a prosecutor in her former life. They are good friends. They've known each other for many years. And the vice president says that in order for Democrats to maintain control of the Senate and do more in Congress in the next cycle, they need to elect Angela Alsobrooks to that seat. I want you to hear a little bit more about her support for Ms. Alsobrooks.
We've known each other for quite some time, maybe before some people were born. And she is a fighter for our most fundamental freedoms, including the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what she's supposed to do. And when we win majorities in the United States Congress in November, Angela's vote will help President Biden and me restore Roe v. Wade and reproductive freedom for millions of Americans.
And so the vice president has said that Angela Alsobrooks is a compassionate fighter, somebody who is going to be tough on crime. But here's the thing, in Maryland, it's a state that is reliably blue. It will most likely go for President Biden in November. But the Senate race is very different. Larry Hogan is a former Maryland governor who, I even saw a commercial this morning. He's running, it sounds like he's running as an independent. He's a Republican. He's running as a Republican. But that's a message format that may do well for him in Maryland, as he was a likable and favored governor at that time. And so it's going to be a tough race for Angela Alsobrooks. I would not be surprised, Chris, if we see Kamala Harris show up for her more before the election in November.
You know, I think you can make the argument, Symone, that she is running both, Angela Alsobrooks is running both for and against history, right? And when I say against history, the New York Times reports that 75 black women have run for the Senate since 2010. Just 10 have even gotten a major party nomination. And it also, I don't know their backstory, but it doesn't surprise me that they're friends, because in my experience in covering candidates and candidates of color, there are so few at that level that there is a bond that comes from experiencing something nobody else really knows or understands. Is there enough of an apparatus in place to support black women candidates for office right now?
Well, look, I think the black women who are on the ballot, who have received the major party nomination, right? You cited two of them, Angela Alsobrooks in Maryland and Lisa Blunt Rochester in Delaware. I do think they have the support. Delaware, the seat that Lisa Blunt Rochester is running to attain is one of two seats in Delaware. Joe Biden used to be a senator from Delaware. Lisa Blunt Rochester would be the first black woman ever elected to represent the Senate in Delaware. Same for Angela Alsobrooks when it comes to Maryland. And I do think that the Democratic Party, by virtue of what you're seeing today in Angela Alsobrooks and Governor Wes Moore, very popular governor, who has a strong machine behind him, having just come into office a little over a year or so ago, helped power Angela Alsobrooks to be the Democratic nominee. So I think there is an infrastructure, but the road is definitely hard for Black women candidates. It's hard for women candidates in general, and then you overlay race on top of that. But that's why I think it's so important that Vice President Harris showed up today. She knows Angela Alsobrooks primarily because when Vice President Harris, in her former life, when she was the DA in San Francisco, then the Attorney General in California, she was the only Black woman, senior elected, top cop, as prosecutors like to call themselves, frankly, to be honest, top cop in the state, in the country. There was a Black woman. So all of these other Black women coming up under her, they looked up to her and looked to her as a model, and a number of the things she did in California as a model. And it's no surprise to me that the event they came together today was for gun violence. It's an issue that the Vice President has led on since time she was in the Attorney General's office, through her time in the Senate and in the White House.
Let me ask you about the big picture of the campaign. The Biden campaign launching a new ad played before the first game of the NBA Finals, and I want to listen to part of that.
Joe Biden has made defending our basic freedoms the cause of his presidency, and he's running for re-election to finish the job. To protect the freedom for women to make their own health care decisions, the freedom for our children to be safe from gun violence, the freedom to vote and have your vote counted. Under Joe Biden, the sun will not set on this flag. American democracy will not break.
I think it's fair to say, I'm going to go out on a limb, but there are plenty of people who might be more inclined to watch a basketball game than a presidential debate, let's say, that's upcoming. But can I ask you about that outreach? I think there are probably a lot of low information, low propensity voters, right? That may be part of that audience. How do you do that outreach? Because it's only 5 months, and 5 months may seem like a long time, but it's such a small sliver of the voting population that's going to decide the election.
Only 5 months, to your point, until November 5th, even less than that when people actually start voting. I remind you, in Michigan, for example, early vote starts 40 days before Election Day. So the last week in September, people will actually be casting ballots in Michigan and other states across the country. Look, I think it's not nonpartisan, right? Because it is a partisan message that they are bringing to a audience that is not looking for to have a political meal, if you will. Yeah. They're reaching the non-political group chats, as I like to say. And ads do that, but also showing up in unlikely spaces and places. You know very well, Chris, where campaigns will have scheduled stops and then unscheduled stops that are called OTR, off the record stops, that aren't on their calendar, but they're popping in somewhere where people are not expecting them as a surprise, but to also have a conversation and meet some voters and people and interface with folks that they haven't otherwise been able to do. I think you're going to see a lot more of that from the Biden-Harris campaign. We've seen the Trump campaign do a little bit of that, not as much. They have not had as robust outreach to trying to expand their base of voters. And for Biden and Harris, it's going to be critical that they bring back that coalition that propelled them to the White House in 2020. A number of those base voters, who folks would say are reliable Democratic voters, but they need to be turned out. And they have to be reached. And I think that's why we're going to see, for example, tonight, gun violence awareness, having a special WNBA game here in Washington, D.C. And the second gentleman is showing up to see the Indiana Fever take the court against the Washington Mystics. Again, a place where voters who aren't coming for a political meal, they're coming for the basketball, but they're going to get the second gentleman.
All right. Aaron Gilchrist and Simone Sanders Townsend, thank you both.